Welcome to episode 34 of the Popanimecomics Lounge. My guest today is Cosplayer Kira Scarlet, who has cosplayed as Ezra from Fairy Tail, many different Pokemon including Umbreon and Eevee, as well as a few Pokemon trainers, and as Cloud from Final Fantasy. But before we dive into the interview, I'd like to remind everybody to please follow me on Twitter at PopAnimeComics, as well as on our website, popanimecomics.com, for all articles relating to anime, comics, and pop culture. So without further ado, let's dive right into this interview. How long have you been cosplaying for?
I would say about 2 years, roughly.
And now many of your cosplays are anime and comics. When were you first exposed to anime and comics?
Anime I was probably exposed maybe 6 years ago. My friends pretty much got me into it because they're into it. And comics, I'd say, probably around the same time. I pretty much got into that because basically from like TV shows like Batman, and when I got a little older, the Teen Titans, and then when I got even older, Young Justice, and then I got to the comics based on those shows. So I was probably into anime first.
And then when were you exposed to the cosplay world?
5 or 6 years ago, I went to my first New York Comic Con, and I saw everyone dressing up and everything, and I thought it was really cool, and I wanted to try it. And when I went the next year, I made my first costume, which was Eevee from Pokemon. And I went the next year, made another one, then I kept going to more conventions, and it escalated from there.
And how did you go about creating your own costume? What skills did you utilize, as well as how'd you go creating the actual costume itself?
Depends on the costume. When I first started out, I watched a lot of YouTube videos. There's a lot of videos online that can basically teach you how to do pretty much everything. Eventually, I needed to get my own sewing machine because you really can't hand sew everything, because everything would either fall apart and it would take forever to make. Also, my grandma knows how to sew, so she taught me the basics, and she still helps me a lot. We work on a lot of stuff together, which is nice. Yeah, I would say mostly YouTube videos and a lot of trial and error.
And how do you go about finding materials and balancing the cost of materials and finding substitutes if you can't get a certain material?
Getting materials is a real challenge because I live on Long Island, and really the only place to get material is Joann's, and they have a very limited array of materials to choose from. I know Yaya Han is starting her cosplay line in Joann's next year, which will be great. That'll make things easier, but up until now, I had to order a lot of stuff online, which is a challenge because a lot of the time you picture the things, but it comes in and it's not really what it looked like online, so that's always a challenge. I would say online is also more cost effective. I mean, I buy mostly from either Amazon or Fabric.com, and it's usually pretty reliable. I haven't had too many problems, only here and there, but I would say that's the most cost effective because Joann's stuff are very expensive.
And how do you balance the economics of certain materials with certain props of your costumes and your cosplays?
I would say when I find something I buy like an excess of material, if I can find it for cheap, and that way in the future, then I could just use it again, so I don't have to keep rebuying stuff. So if I find like a black fabric I really like, I'll buy it in bulk like more than what I need, so that way in the future, like I'll probably need black fabric again, then I can just use it again for the next costume.
And how do you handle making your props?
Some of the props I made on my own. A lot of them my friends have helped me with. I also have friends who have parents who have power tools that I don't have any myself. So basically I'm a search for people who own power tools I can borrow and they can help me with. My friends made my Harley hammer for me, which is super nice of them. My Buster sword, I made that by myself with the help of my friend, which took months. That, again, is watching a lot of YouTube videos on how people have made them, and also thinking about materials I've used in the past and seeing what would work best for the Buster sword. A lot of people use wood and everything, but I didn't want to use that because I felt like it would be too heavy and they wouldn't let me into the convention with it. So me and my friend had to go to Home Depot and Lowe's and all these places to find a really light, sturdy material. So it's a lot of searching.
And speaking about your sword experience, when you're putting a cosplay together, does a con influence what you would cosplay as?
Yeah, I mean, I tried to wear a costume based on what the con focuses. If it's like strictly a comic convention, I'll try to wear a comic book character. If it's an anime convention, then I'll wear a costume from an anime.
So let's talk about your costumes. You mentioned that Eevee was your first cosplay. What made you choose to be Eevee?
That's my favorite Pokemon, and Pokemon's been my favorite thing since I was 6 years old. So I really wanted to cosplay Eevee, and it was easy for me. At that point, I had no skills at all. So I basically bought like 2 brown t-shirts and made the top and the skirt out of like 2 brown t-shirts and just like colored bunny ears in brown fabric, and that's basically how I made it. So basically because it was easy and because it's my favorite Pokemon.
And then following your Eevee costume, you continued along with Pokemon, where you were a Pokemon trainer as well as you were a Pokemon Trainer Gold. How did these costumes come about?
When I did Pokemon Trainer Red, that was when I first got my sewing machine, and I wanted to try it out and like do something easy. So I basically just made the trainer red jacket out of really cheap fabric that I had just to try out the sewing machine, because I knew that the only thing I really had to make was the jacket. Looking back, like now it looks really shoddy, but at the time I thought it was so great. But basically just trying it out. And then the same thing with gold. I really wanted to learn how to make a skirt. So instead of like he wears pants, but I wanted to make a skirt since it was female trainer gold. So I taught myself how to make a skirt for that. And I basically took a red sweatshirt and just added like embellishments on it to make it look like gold. And that's pretty much how those came about.
And what were the challenges of making these two costumes, considering that you were very new at making your cosplays?
Basically, I had no idea what I was doing. I was winging it. I was like using shirts I had as patterns to make Red's jacket. So yeah, I would say actually making the skirt was the easiest part because I had a tutorial to like show me exactly what to do. But I still remember like I did the measurements wrong. The first one I made was like way too small. I had to redo it. But basically the biggest challenge is that I had no idea what I was doing and I was pretty much winging it.
And with these two characters, how did you find your props of the Pokemon as well as the Pokeball?
Actually, the Pokemon and the Pokeball I borrowed from my friend Dylan. He had the plushies and the Pokeball and he had badges and everything. And then for gold, he has like a pool stick. So that I just got on Amazon for like $6.
And then continuing with Pokemon, you cosplayed as Umbreon as well as a shock therapy Pikachu. What were the inspirations for these cosplays?
So I picked Umbreon because I just like Umbreon. That's basically why I picked it. And hopefully I'll do more evolutions in the future. And then for Electroshock Therapy Pikachu, I wanted to do cosplay for Halloween, and I was like thinking of ideas. I thought it would be cool to kind of do like sing the silent like electroshock therapy thing with Pikachu because Pikachu is an electric type. So I thought it would be cool if it looked like electric rods were like attached to its own cheeks, and it was like, kind of like a zombie version.
And with your electric shock therapy Pikachu, you used a straitjacket. How did you come up with the idea to use that item in your cosplay?
Basically, I was just thinking about an insane asylum and different things that you see in like horror movies that center around that. So I thought of like the electroshock therapy, which kind of like a lobotomy, and I thought that a lot of them were in like straitjackets. So I made the top into a straitjacket instead of just a normal top.
And how were these two Pokemon interpretations of cosplays received at cons?
I would say the Umbreon was received better. A lot of people thought I was either Espeon or Dark Pikachu, which I thought was interesting. The electroshock therapy, a lot of people were saying like just like scary Pikachu, which is fine. Like they pretty much got the idea. Some people didn't get it, but a lot of people who did get it thought it was really cool.
And around this time, you also cosplayed as Isaiah Orihara from Durara.
Yeah.
How did that costume come about? And do you like doing simple but effective cosplays?
I basically did that because he's one of my favorite anime characters ever. And I would say that the good part of cosplaying simple things is that it's a lot more comfortable to wear at conventions, especially if I'm like traveling a distance, more comfortable to drive in and just spend the entire day in. So I think that's definitely a plus. I think more intricate costumes are more fun to make and do a photo shoot in, but as far as going to conventions, simple costumes are more comfortable.
And you also did Ezra from Fairy Tail. What drew you to cosplaying Ezra?
She's one of my other favorite anime characters. She's actually the second cosplay I ever made after Evie. I did her third year I went to New York Comic Con. The second year I cosplayed at New York Comic Con. I think she's super cool and just like a really strong, awesome character. And at the time my hair was the same color as hers and I didn't have any wigs yet, so I thought that was perfect.
And why did you choose to do the version with her with no armor on and fiery red pants rather than another version?
Well, at the time, like I said, that's only the second cosplay I ever made, so I had no idea how to make armor. I'm still actually very new to armor at all. At the time, I didn't even have a sewing machine, so I had to use my grandma's sewing machine that's from like the 40s or 50s. It's like really, really old, so we made that together, and at the time, that's really all I could do.
And how did you go about making her sword?
The swords I actually didn't make. I bought a metal katana for the photo shoot, but when I was going to New York Comic Con, I knew they wouldn't let me in with it. So I bought like very thin wooden ones that they would let me in with for the convention.
And when you're cosplaying characters with weapons, do you have this dilemma of what you can bring into a con and what you can't?
Yes, I'm always worried that they're not going to let me in. I try to make everything out of like very thin material that's very lightweight so they'll let me in. So far I haven't had anything taken away, but they were like really iffy about my Buster Sword this year at New York Comic Con, but luckily they let me in with it.
You cosplayed another redhead, Yoko from Gurren Lagann. What really inspired you to want to be a Yoko?
I actually had a lot of people tell me that they wanted me to cosplay Yoko, so that was like kind of upon request. But I love Yoko, she's awesome. And That was actually one of the first props I ever made, so it gave me a chance to work on a prop. And I needed a lot of help with that one because making a rifle was like a lot of work. And that was probably one of the first costumes I made completely on my own without any help as far as the actual costume part. So, and it was a lot of fun to make because there's a lot of different pieces and everything.
And Yoko is a bit of an edgier character based on her physique as well as her personality. How does that affect you when you cosplay as her?
I would say that she's edgy, but she's also pretty upbeat and friendly. So, especially cons, like I try to stay pretty positive, despite kind of, I guess, what the character is, because, you know, I want to talk to people and be friendly and make friends. I mean, I think Yoko's like a pretty upbeat character, so she's good to wear to cons because I can kind of stay in character while still being friendly to everyone.
And now, outside of your anime characters, you've also done comic characters. How did you get involved with cosplaying as Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn?
Well, Poison Ivy is my favorite comic character, one of my favorites. And basically, I went to a convention with my friend years ago, and she really wanted to be Harley Quinn, so she asked me to do Poison Ivy with her because they're friends. So I made my Poison Ivy cosplay, and then over the years I keep like adding to it and improving upon it because there's so many different designs that it's something you can really build upon and evolve. So hopefully I'll continue to do that in the future. And then same thing with Harley Quinn. I really like Harley too because she's had so many different designs that you can really do so much with her and be creative. So I've ended up making about like 3 different Harley Quinns at this point.
And in creating both Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn, what references did you use from DC Comics? Did you use any artists in particular and their character designs for either Harley Quinn or Poison Ivy?
For Harley Quinn, I mainly focused on her New 52 comic as the reference point for that. For my Christmas Harley Quinn, that was my own design. I got the idea for wrapping my hammer like a present from one of her covers as well, though.
And did you use any reference for Poison Ivy?
Mostly I just go on Google Images and like look at certain things and like look at her different characteristics. Instead of doing a one-piece leaf course that like she has in most of her comics, I decided to do 2 pieces. I know she has a new book coming out in February and I'm super excited, so I might redo it depending on what her look looks like just to keep it updated.
And in your cosplay of both Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn, you used a variety of different materials. Mm-hmm. How did you go about finding these materials?
For Poison Ivy, I basically just needed like 1 million leaves, so I ordered like a bunch of ivy leaves in bulk off Amazon, like individually glued each leaf onto the costume, which wasn't too bad. That wasn't too hard to find. And then for Harley Quinn, the New 52 one was especially difficult because I needed cords of the shorts and the leggings and shoes, and I only used to be blue and red, but they all needed to be like the same shade of blue and red, otherwise it would have looked awful. So it was really difficult because I had to order everything offline, so it was really difficult to like match the fabric corset to the leggings to the shoes and make sure that everything was the same shade. That was definitely, out of all of them, the biggest challenge.
And then when you're at a con dressed as either Poison Ivy or Harley Quinn, how do you get into their characters?
I would say Harley Quinn, it's just being like super happy and friendly because she's like super smiley. So I make sure to smile a lot. And then for Poison Ivy, she's kind of like a little more standoffish and disinterested. So especially if it's a long day and I'm super tired by the end and grumpy. But I guess just for her, I'm like a lot more serious.
And you've done 3 Harley Quinn costumes. Do you have a favorite one that you've done out of all of them?
I actually really like the Christmas one, because I was just really happy with how it turned out, and it's really comfy and really cute.
And when you go to these cons dressed as Poison Ivy or Harley Quinn, how are they received, as comic fans are very particular?
They've always been well received. I think people like that I put my own spin on things. I think Poison Ivy gets some of the best reception because since I made a Venus flytrap, a lot of people like that because I think it's different.
And you also cosplayed as Cloud at New York Comic Con this year. How did you go about building that costume up?
That costume, actually, I went to Tokyo this past August, and they have a lot of cosplay shops all around Tokyo. So I went to one in Ikebukuro, and I saw the Cloud one, so I couldn't resist, so I bought it. And then when I got home, I made the Buster Sword, and I styled the wig. The wig I bought off Amazon, and I used this like special styling gel and hairspray to style it. And then the Buster Sword I made out of insulation foam, PVC pipe, Wonderflex clay, and balsa wood.
So what happened with your sword at New York Comic Con?
So basically, we were going in with it and they were like really inspecting it. And I was like, it's foam, like please let me in. And then they let me in with it. It's like actually very light. So I would have been kind of surprised if they didn't let me in with it, but they were being really strict, so I was worried, but it was okay. They let me in.
And now, outside of going to cons and creating costumes, you're also involved in selling prints and taking photographs professionally in your cosplay costumes. How did you go about getting involved in all of that?
Well, I really wanted nice photos to put on my page, not one taken in my room or like my basement. So my friend takes most of my pictures for me now, and we try to find settings that would go along with the character. Like we tried to shoot Harley Quinn in the city. I have a fence covered in ivy in my backyard, so we tried to do ivy there and like things that would kind of make the backgrounds look nicer. I just recently started doing photo shoots with real photographers. As far as prints go, prints is kind of challenging because they can be really expensive and it's hard to find a place that will do it for cheap and have good quality. So first Staples was actually the cheapest and came out the best quality. A lot of the problems that in my earlier photos, we like didn't really know what we were doing as far as like photo shoots. The photo quality came out really poor and then the prints come out poor. So for like the newer costumes, the photos are better because we know what we're doing a little more as far as photography. I just started selling prints. I have like the online store, but it's closed most of the time. It's easier just to like go to conventions and sell them then. So right now I mostly just do that.
And what is your store called?
Which is storeenvy.com and then Kira Scarlet.
Before we get into promos, do you have any advice for anybody who wants to get into the cosplay industry, whether they're cosplaying or making costumes?
I would say to keep at it, not because it can be really discouraging because everyone wants to make the best of every costume and make all these intricate characters and everything, but not everything always works out. Like you're going to mess up and make mistakes and things aren't going to look the way you want, but with practice, you'll get better and you'll slowly see your costume quality start to improve. And just keep practicing, watch YouTube videos because they are super helpful. Don't be afraid to ask your friends and whoever for help because I've had so much help from my friends and family and everything. The most important thing is to have fun and not worry about what other people think.
And then finally, do you have anything you'd like to promote? Facebook, Twitter, website?
So my Facebook page is facebook.com/Kira Scarlet Cosplay and my Instagram is @Kira Scarlet Cosplay, so check out my stuff.
Thank you for listening to this week's podcast, and as always, subscribe to this podcast either on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, or SoundCloud, or anywhere else where you listen to your podcast, so it finds you and you don't find it. Until next week, everybody, have a wonderful week.